The moment I read the text, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I froze the travel fund. One tap. 3 years of planning. Gone in an instant. That was my answer to the message glowing on my kitchen counter at 10:48 p.m. Joe, we've decided it's best if you don't come. Olivia wants it to just be her family. You've already done your part by paying. My part? Paying. The house was dark except for the dim under-cabinet lights. The ceiling fan spun lazily, stirring the thick Florida night air. I sat at the table surrounded by neatly labeled mesh bags, each one filled with sunscreen, seashell necklaces, and Grandma Joe's Florida Adventure keychains I'd made myself. The smell of coconut oil hung in the air. My hands were still sticky from wrapping the last souvenir when the message came in, slicing through the silence like a knife. I stared at the words until the screen dimmed. Then another buzz. Please don't take this personally, Joe. It's just simpler this way. Simpler. That word hit harder than anything else. For a long moment, I didn't move. I could hear the distant hum of the highway outside, the rhythmic chirping of cicadas, and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. The phone lay face down on the table, but the words burned through the wood. I pushed back from my chair slowly, like someone moving through water. On the mantel above the TV, the photo of Henry, my late husband, smiled back at me from a fishing boat off Key West. I'd planned to bring that photo to the villa. I'd even packed a lavender candle to light in his memory during the beach dinner. I'd imagined us barefoot in the sand, the kids holding my hands as I told them stories about their grandfather's terrible sunburn and how he used to sneak coconuts into our suitcases. I'd pictured their laughter. The kind that makes your chest ache in the best way. But that image shattered with one text. Because here's the thing no one says out loud, exclusion doesn't always arrive in slammed doors or shouting matches. Sometimes it arrives through polite messages sent late at night. And the cruelest part? I had paid for everything. The beachfront villa in the Keys. The flights. The paddleboards. The sunset seafood boil. The luau. Every single dollar. When I retired from the library, I started a mason jar tucked behind the flower bin, my dream trip fund. Every time I skipped a small luxury, like a pair of sandals or my favorite cinnamon tea, I slipped a $10 bill inside. Eventually, I tutored kids online at night. I stopped using the heater in winter. I wore layers instead. 3 years. Quiet sacrifices. All for them. Because this trip wasn't just a vacation. It was supposed to stitch us back together. After Henry passed, I watched my place in the family shrink like a sandcastle against the tide. First, it was holidays at Olivia's mother's house. Then family pictures that somehow didn't include me. Then, just the kids' dinners. Little by little, I became the afterthought. The footnote. The wallet with a smile. And still, I planned this trip. I told myself, once we're all under the same Florida sun, once the grandkids run laughing across the sand, maybe they'll remember. Who tucked them in? Who drove through hurricanes to pick them up? Who baked key lime pie every Sunday for 20 years? But love doesn't fix entitlement. I walked to my small office, opened my laptop, and stared at the glowing numbers on the bank page. $24,281. 67, that was the total. Linked to every booking, every reservation. My name, my money, my dream. The cursor hovered over a small blue button, freeze account. With one click, every card attached to that trip, villa, flights, car rentals, excursions, would go silent. No warning. No explanation. Just like the text they sent me. I didn't press it. Not yet. I sat there in the stillness of my Florida night, listening to the palm fronds scrape gently against the window. And something deep inside me began to shift. Not fast. Not dramatic. Slow. Like a heavy anchor being lifted from the ocean floor. They hadn't forgotten me. They had excluded me on purpose. Confident I'd accept it like I always had. They forgot who raised them. I closed the banking tab and opened a blank document. At the top, I typed, alternate guest list. And I started writing names. Millie, my neighbor, who cared for her husband alone for years. Rita, who hadn't heard from her children in 5 Christmases. Doris, who had never once seen the ocean, despite living 30 miles from it. Women like me. Overlooked. Underestimated. I leaned back in my chair and let out a slow breath. What spread through me wasn't sadness anymore. It wasn't rage either. It was something cleaner. Sharper. Power. The trip wasn't canceled. Not anymore. The story had just changed. The morning after that text, I woke up before sunrise, not because I had anywhere to be, but because sleep wouldn't come. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, watching its blades cut through the dim orange light creeping in from the street. The words from the night before looped in my head, dull and heavy like a church bell ringing in the distance. You've already done your part by paying. My part. I padded barefoot into the kitchen. The tiles were cool against my feet, the air heavy with that early Florida humidity that clings to you before the sun fully breaks through. I brewed a pot of cinnamon tea and sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by the travel kits I'd made for the kids the night before. Their names, Eli, Olivia Jr., and Chloe, were written in my neat cursive on each bag. I ran my fingers over the letters, feeling something between heartbreak and steel settle in my chest. By the time the sun broke through the palm trees outside, painting golden stripes across the cabinets, I had made a decision. I would not confront them. No late-night calls. No emotional speeches. No begging to be included in something I built. I was done performing gratitude for scraps. Instead, I was going to give them one last, silent chance. Not for them, for me. So when I moved, I'd know there was no misunderstanding. I opened my phone and sent a short message to my son, Mark. Morning, sweetheart. Let me know if you'd like help packing the kids' carry-ons or snacks for the flight. I have some extra motion sickness bands if Chloe needs them. Nothing accusatory. No hint of what I was really thinking. Just a soft hand extended one final time. And then I waited. An hour passed. The little red notification popped up beneath my message. But no reply. 2 hours. Nothing. By lunch, I'd received a Facebook notification that Olivia had posted a picture, matching straw hats and floral outfits laid out on their bed, captioned "Family trip loading palm tree sparkles, #family only." The words stung more than I wanted to admit. Not because of the hashtag, but because of the smug certainty in it. As if the story of this trip had already been written, and I was just a footnote in the credits. I closed the app and turned my attention back to my laptop. My fingers hovered over the banking screen again. The blue freeze account button blinked back at me like a dare. Not yet, Joe. Be patient. They were scheduled to fly out of Tampa International at 9:55 a.m. in 3 days. Check-in would likely be around 7:45. If I froze the account at exactly 7:30, the villa, the car rental, and the excursions would all be declined within minutes. No alerts would be sent. The cards would simply stop working. They'd only find out when they tried to swipe. But I wasn't impulsive. Not this time. I'd spent too many years rushing to smooth over their mistakes. This time, I was going to be precise. I opened my calendar and circled their departure date in red. Then I scribbled one note in the margin. 7:30 a.m. Flip the switch. That evening, Mark finally called. My stomach tightened as the phone buzzed across the counter. But when I picked up, it wasn't him on the other end. It was Olivia. Her voice was chipper. Too chipper. Hi, Joe. Just checking to make sure the last payment goes through tomorrow morning. The villa manager said something about verifying the primary card. I could hear the faint sound of kids laughing in the background, probably as they tried on their new vacation outfits. Yes, I said slowly, letting the silence stretch between each word. Everything's on schedule. Oh, perfect, she chirped. We're just so excited. I know this will be such a special trip for, well, everyone. Everyone. I forced a polite laugh. I'm sure it will be. She didn't ask if I was packing. She didn't ask how I felt. She didn't even pretend to include me. She hung up after a few minutes, her cheerful voice fading like a radio signal I was happy to lose. When the call ended, I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone. I walked to my closet, pulled out the small fireproof lockbox, and set it on the kitchen table. Inside were all the travel documents I'd saved over the past 3 years. Printed confirmations, receipts, notes from my calls with the travel agent. And at the very top, bold, unmistakable, was my name. Account holder, Josephine Joe Matthews. Authorized users, none. No shared access. No cosigners. No alternate billing owners. Just me. It hit me then, with perfect, icy clarity. They hadn't just erased me from the trip emotionally. They'd built their entire vacation on a financial structure that I controlled completely. And they didn't even realize it. They assumed I'd keep playing the role. The silent funder. The invisible backbone. I closed the box carefully and slid it back into the closet. My mind was already shifting gears. Later that night, I stood out on my porch as the Florida air thickened with the scent of rain. A storm was rolling in from the Gulf, slow, deliberate, heavy with humidity. The palm trees swayed in the rising wind, and thunder rumbled faintly in the distance. I leaned on the railing and thought about all the years I'd spent holding this family together like duct tape no one bothered to look at. Holidays, birthdays, graduations. Always planning, always paying, always smiling. And now they were walking onto a plane believing I'd quietly step aside. They didn't see the storm coming. The morning of their flight arrived with that sticky Florida heat that clings to everything before the sun even rises. I woke before my alarm, as if my body knew what needed to be done. The house was quiet. The sky outside was still dark, streaked with soft pink at the edges like a bruise just starting to bloom. I brewed a cup of cinnamon tea, my hands steady. No nerves. No hesitation. I'd spent too many nights second-guessing myself in the past. Not today. Today was clarity. Their flight out of Tampa was scheduled for 9:55 a.m. Boarding would start around 9:15. Check-in? 7:45, maybe a little earlier if Olivia wanted to breeze through security with her matching straw hats and printed itineraries. I glanced at the clock. 7:29. The laptop was already open on the kitchen counter. The Dream Trip account page blinked patiently at me, the little blue freeze account, toggle waiting like a loaded slingshot. I wrapped my fingers around my warm mug, took one slow breath, and clicked. Freeze mode activated. No alert. No pop-up to them. Just silence. Every linked card, villa, airline incidentals, rental car, snorkeling tours, the seafood boil, all locked. The money was still there. But no one could touch it. Not without me. I closed the laptop, set my mug down, and walked to the front porch. The cicadas were buzzing already, and the palms in my yard swayed gently in the morning breeze. Across the street, my neighbor was watering her begonias. To anyone passing by, I looked like any other grandma enjoying a quiet Friday morning. Inside, though, I was steel. At 7:48 a.m., my phone buzzed. Mark. Hey, Mom. Quick thing, are you near your laptop? The check-in desk is saying the card on file isn't going through for the luggage fees. Probably just a glitch. Can you look? I didn't reply. Another text followed 2 minutes later. They're saying it was declined again. Can you double-check? We're at the counter. I placed the phone face down on the porch railing and listened to the birds chirping. Somewhere in the distance, a lawnmower started up. By 8:02, the tone shifted. Mom, this is weird. They're saying all the cards on the booking are getting flagged. We can't check the bags. What's going on? Still nothing from me. Then came the call. The ringtone broke the morning stillness, like a crack of lightning. I let it ring until it stopped. A voicemail arrived. Mark's voice, low and urgent now. Mom, hey. Look, something's going on with the account. They're not letting us board unless we pay the balance again. If you're up, please call me. I don't know what's happening. I sipped my tea and watched a squirrel race across the power line like it had somewhere important to be. 8:17, another voicemail. Olivia this time. Her tone had shifted from perky to tight. Joe, it's Olivia. There's some kind of problem with the payment. The villa is saying the card on file has been paused, and now the airline won't process the baggage fees either. Could you please call us right away? We're trying to fix this, but we need you to unlock it. Thanks. Unlock it. 8:29. 3 more texts. 2 missed calls. Another voicemail. This one from Mark again, the calm slipping out of his voice. Mom. Please. Just pick up. We're stuck at the counter. They're holding our boarding passes. I don't know what's happening with the account, but if this is about the trip, can we talk? Please. I didn't respond. I didn't gloat either. There was no triumphant laugh, no dramatic music swelling in the background. Just the quiet satisfaction of watching a truth reveal itself without me saying a single word. They had built their entire vacation on the assumption that I would stay quiet, that I would keep funding a story I wasn't allowed to be part of. They were learning, in real time, how wrong they were. By 8:41, another email came in, this time from the villa manager. Subject: Urgent. Payment authorization failed. Dear Mrs. Matthews, due to the recent pause on your primary account, all associated bookings have been automatically canceled. We've released the property to the next party on the waiting list. I read it twice slowly. Then I closed the email and leaned back in my chair. At 9:02, the texts changed tone entirely. Mom, what did you do? If this is about that text, can we please talk? They're not letting us through. We can't rebook anything last minute. The kids are crying. I turned my phone over and looked at the home screen. There were 17 missed calls, 12 texts, 3 voicemails. I placed the phone gently on the kitchen counter and poured myself another cup of tea. 9:15, boarding time. I pictured them at the gate, Olivia frantically digging through her purse, Mark on the phone with the airline, the kids confused and restless. Maybe Olivia's mother was sighing dramatically, the way she always did when things didn't go her way. They'd never admit it aloud, but for the first time, they were standing somewhere without me holding it up for them. 9:36, one last text. From Mark. We can't get on the flight. The bookings are gone. If this is what I think it is, you made your point. I don't even know what to say. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I powered the phone off completely. The storm had broken, and I hadn't raised my voice once. When I woke up the next morning, the house was washed in that soft Florida light that makes everything look gentler than it really is. My phone was still off. I hadn't checked a single message since the airport chaos, and honestly, I didn't plan to. I brewed another pot of cinnamon tea, opened the kitchen windows to let in the warm breeze, and for the first time in months, I felt still. Not waiting for a thank you. Not bracing for a phone call. Just still. When I finally turned the phone on, it buzzed violently like a trapped hornet. Notifications poured in, missed calls, voicemails, texts from Mark, from Olivia, even from Olivia's mother. The group chat was littered with frantic messages, question marks, and a few passive-aggressive lines from Olivia about miscommunication. But one email stood out. Subject: Your refund confirmation. Dear Mrs. Matthews, as the primary account holder, your freeze has triggered automatic reversals for all pending transactions. Funds will return to your account within 24 to 48 hours. I clicked it open. One by one, line after line, it listed them. Beachfront Villa in the Keys, refund initiated. Airline baggage and upgrades, reversal processed. Car rental authorization canceled. Sunset Seafood Boil, refund issued. Snorkeling tour, refund issued. I stared at the screen as the total climbed higher with each notification. Every dollar that had been quietly taken for granted was flowing back to where it came from, my account. For years, I'd poured my savings into memories for them. Now, for the first time, I was watching it come back, not as an act of generosity, but as a reclamation. By noon, Mark sent a long text. Mom, we couldn't get on the flight. They released the villa. Everything fell apart. I don't know if this was intentional or some mistake, but if it was, you've made your point. The kids were really disappointed. Olivia's furious. Honestly, I don't know what to say. Call me when you can. I read it twice. Not once did he say, I'm sorry. Not once did he mention how it felt to cut me out. Just the inconvenience. I didn't reply. Later that afternoon, I sat out on my porch with my notebook, the same one where I'd written Henry's fishing recipes and the grandkids' birthdays. I flipped to a clean page and wrote across the top, The Forgotten Women. And then I started listing names. Millie, my neighbor who brought me soup when Henry passed and never asked for anything in return. Rita, who baked cakes for every church event but never once had a vacation outside our county. Doris, who raised 4 children alone and now spent most days looking out her window at the Gulf, saying she'd get there one day. Linda, who cared for her sister through a long illness and hadn't smiled in months. As I wrote, I could feel something stirring inside me, not bitterness, not vengeance, but a kind of quiet strength I hadn't felt in years. I picked up the phone and dialed Millie first. Millie, do you own a swimsuit? I asked. There was a pause on the other end. Joe, what kind of question is that? A real one, I said, smiling. I'm planning a trip. And I want you to come with me. She laughed, unsure. Honey, I haven't left Florida since the Reagan administration. Well, I said, leaning back in my chair, it's time. By evening, I'd made 6 calls. Each conversation started the same way, hesitant, confused, and ended in stunned, tearful disbelief. You're serious? Rita whispered. Completely. But why me? Because someone should, I answered simply. Because you matter. As night fell, I opened my laptop again, not to unfreeze the old trip, but to build a new one from scratch. 1 villa. 6 women. 7 days. This time, my name would sit on top of every document, not as a silent benefactor, but as the host. I searched for rentals farther south, a quiet beachfront house near Marathon, tucked away from the resorts and cruise ships. A place with a wide porch, hammocks swaying in the breeze, and a long dining table big enough for all of us. As I clicked through options, something strange happened. For the first time in years, I wasn't picturing my family's faces. I wasn't wondering if Olivia would approve or if the kids would get bored. I was picturing us. Millie laughing under the string lights. Rita dipping her toes in the ocean for the first time. Doris sitting by the water with a book in her lap and no responsibilities pressing on her shoulders. I was building a memory that didn't depend on anyone's permission. Before I went to bed, I checked my bank account again. Most of the refunds had already hit. My dream trip fund was full, right where it started. And this time, I wasn't building a bridge for people who didn't want to cross it. I was building a table for people who would show up. As I turned off the lights and stood by the window, I caught my reflection against the night sky. For years, I'd been the woman waiting to be chosen. But now, I was the one choosing. And I slept that night with the windows open, listening to the Gulf breeze push against the palms, feeling lighter than I had in decades. The next morning, the Florida sky was brilliant blue, washed clean after a night of rain. I opened the porch door and stepped outside with my cup of cinnamon tea, breathing in the warm, salty air that drifted up from the bay. For the first time in a long time, my morning didn't start with checking someone else's needs. No packing lists. No group messages. No Olivia dictating the schedule. It was just me, the breeze, and the sound of the wind chime Henry bought on our 35th anniversary. After breakfast, I sat down at my laptop and opened the travel site I'd bookmarked the night before. I wasn't hesitating anymore. I knew exactly what I wanted. The villa sat on a quiet stretch of beach just south of Marathon Key, wide porch, private boardwalk to the sand, 6 bedrooms, 1 enormous communal table under a string of lights. The listing photos showed hammocks swaying gently in the shade of coconut palms. A little slice of peace I hadn't realized I'd been starving for. I clicked book now without a second thought. This time, everything was in my name. No shared accounts. No family group authorizations. No invisible fine print where I disappeared somewhere between thank you and goodbye. Once the reservation confirmation landed in my inbox, I reached for my phone and dialed the first name on my list. Millie? I said when she answered. Yes, Joe. Pack a sun at. We're leaving in 2 weeks. There was silence on the other end, then a sound I hadn't heard from her in years. A laugh. Not polite. Not restrained. A real, full-bellied laugh that cracked something open inside me. You're serious, she said. As the tide, I replied. Call by call, the reactions were the same. Rita cried softly and whispered, no one's ever invited me anywhere. Doris kept asking, what's the catch? And I kept saying, there isn't one. By the time I hung up, my heart was beating fast, not with anxiety like it used to whenever Olivia organized things, but with something better. Excitement. Freedom. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Mark. For a moment, I just stared at his name on the screen. Part of me expected anger, maybe even demands. But his message started softly. Mom, can we talk? Then a second followed. I think we need to clear the air. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I went out back to my garden, snipped a few basil leaves, and let the sun warm my shoulders. It was strange how peaceful the world felt when I stopped carrying everyone else's chaos. Later, I opened his text again. He'd sent another. Look, I know things got messed up. Olivia didn't mean to hurt you. She just wanted the trip to feel a certain way. Maybe she should have worded it differently. We all could have handled things better. But the kids were so excited, and when everything fell apart, it was a mess. I guess what I'm trying to say is, we didn't expect you to react like this. I let out a slow, steady breath. React like this. As if silence and a single click were some wild, unpredictable outburst. As if decades of being sidelined were supposed to end with me apologizing for finally standing still. I didn't reply. Instead, I went back to my notebook. I wrote down dates, flight times, and menu ideas for the new trip. A shrimp boil on the first night. A candlelit dinner on the beach. Morning walks for anyone who wanted them. Hammocks for naps in the shade. No itinerary. No performance. Just space. That evening, Mark called. This time, I answered. His voice was cautious, like someone stepping onto thin ice. Mom? I'm here, I said evenly. Look, about everything that happened, he began. I didn't let him finish. You mean about how you excluded me from a trip I planned and paid for? Silence. Then a shaky, I didn't mean for it to sound like that. But it did, I said. Because that's exactly what it was. He sighed. Olivia just wanted it to be her family. She thought. I know what she thought, I interrupted. She thought I'd smile, pay, and stay quiet. Like always. Another silence. I could hear the kids faintly in the background, arguing over a toy. Mom, we didn't think you'd actually pull the plug. I laughed softly. That's the problem, Mark. You didn't think about me at all. He started to say something, but I stopped him gently. I'm not going to argue with you. What's done is done. I'm not looking for apologies that come only after plans fall apart. I just don't want this to break the family, he said finally. It didn't, I replied calmly. It just showed where the cracks already were. Before he could respond, I told him I had to go. Dinner was on the stove, even though it wasn't. After I hung up, I stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring at the photo of Henry on the wall. His mischievous grin stared back at me, like he knew exactly what I was doing. For years, I'd waited for Mark to see me clearly. For Olivia to respect me. For the kids to remember more than my wallet. But now, I wasn't waiting anymore. The new trip was real. The villa was booked. The guest list was mine. And for the first time, the story was too. 2 weeks later, I stood on the porch with my suitcase by the door, the sun just beginning to rise over the Gulf. The sky was painted in watercolor streaks of orange and soft pink, the kind of quiet Florida morning that makes everything feel like a fresh start. The van I'd rented pulled into the driveway right on time. Millie hopped out of the passenger seat wearing an enormous straw hat, waving like she was boarding a cruise ship. "Joe," she called, her voice bright and crackling with the kind of joy I hadn't heard in years. "I haven't slept all night. I'm too excited." Rita was in the back seat with a cooler full of homemade lemon bars for the road. Doris had on sunglasses 3 sizes too big for her face, looking like she'd stepped out of a movie from the 60s. Linda brought a small notebook where she said she planned to record everything, just so I don't forget a single second. They looked like a mismatched crew of old souls and half-forgotten dreams. And for the first time in years, I wasn't the chauffeur. I was the captain. "Ladies," I said, lifting my mug in a mock toast, "we're going to the Keys." The cheer that erupted could have rivaled a stadium. The drive south was long but easy, the highway flanked by endless water on both sides once we hit the overseas highway. We rolled the windows down, letting the humid breeze tangle our hair. Millie started singing old beach songs, and before I knew it, we were all chiming in like teenagers on a road trip. Somewhere near Isla Morada, Doris pressed her forehead to the window, staring at the turquoise water. "I've lived my whole life an hour away," she whispered, "and I've never seen it like this." I glanced at her, and for a moment, I felt tears sting the back of my eyes. This was exactly what I'd been saving for all those years, not to be tolerated, but to share something beautiful with people who would see it. By the time we pulled up to the villa, the afternoon sun was blazing. The house was even more beautiful than in the photos: pale yellow wood, white trim, a porch that wrapped around the entire structure, and steps that led straight down to the sand. Palm trees swayed lazily in the warm breeze, and the ocean stretched out endlessly behind it, glittering like glass. Millie stepped out first and froze. "Joe," she whispered, "this can't be real." "Oh, it's real," I said, grinning. We walked through the front door together. The cool air inside carried the faint scent of sea salt and citrus. Huge windows let in the sunlight, and the living room opened directly onto the porch where 2 hammocks swayed side by side. "This is ours?" Rita asked, almost like she didn't dare believe it. "All ours," I said. Within an hour, the villa was alive with laughter. Millie claimed the hammock and refused to get out. Doris was already walking barefoot along the waterline, letting the waves lap over her ankles like she'd been waiting her whole life for that exact moment. Linda was in the kitchen organizing snacks like she'd found her second calling. That first evening, we cooked together. Nothing fancy: shrimp boil, corn on the cob, garlic bread, pitchers of iced tea sweating on the table. We ate on the porch under the string lights, the sky melting into deep indigo as the sun disappeared beyond the water. I brought out a framed photo of Henry, the same one I'd planned to bring to the family trip. I placed it in the center of the table. No one questioned it. No one told me to move it aside. Millie raised her glass. "To Joe," she said, her voice trembling just slightly. "For remembering us when no one else did." The others joined in, their glasses clinking together softly. For the first time, I didn't feel like the extra chair at the table. I was the table. After dinner, we sat outside listening to the waves. Rita told stories about her bakery days. Doris confessed she'd always wanted to learn to swim, and Linda admitted she hadn't felt this carefree since she was a teenager. I leaned back in my chair, listening, watching. The moonlight turned everything silver. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for someone else to acknowledge my worth. It was reflected right back at me in the faces around that table. Later that night, as everyone went to their rooms, I stayed out on the porch alone for a moment. The ocean whispered against the shore, steady and sure. I thought about Mark and Olivia, about their frantic texts and guilt-ridden calls, and for once, I didn't feel anger or sadness. I felt distance. Healthy distance. Like finally stepping out of a role I'd been forced to play for too long. Before bed, I checked my phone. There was one new message from Mark. "Mom, the kids keep asking when they'll see you. We should talk." I stared at it for a long time. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't control me anymore. I turned the phone face down and listened to the waves until sleep took me. This trip wasn't about proving a point. It was about reclaiming something I'd almost forgotten I had, the right to choose who gets a seat at my table. By the fourth day of our trip, the villa had settled into a rhythm that felt like it had always been ours. Mornings were slow. Rita brewed coffee while the sun slid over the water, painting the sky in pink and gold. Millie sat on the porch swinging her robe, hair wrapped in a bright scarf, greeting every passing pelican like it was an old friend. Doris took early walks along the beach, her footprints the first to mark the smooth sand each day. Afternoons were a mix of lazy and lively. Sometimes we sat in the hammocks with cold lemonade, talking about nothing. Other times we piled into the van to explore tiny seafood shacks tucked off the road, a farmer's market where Linda haggled like a professional, and a coral reef boat tour that made Millie laugh so hard her son nearly flew into the ocean. And evenings, those were my favorite. Every night we gathered at the long table on the porch, string lights swaying above us, the sea humming in the background. We ate slowly, talked freely, and when the breeze turned warm and soft, someone would start humming an old tune, and the rest of us would join in. There were no forced smiles, no hidden resentments sitting at the table like uninvited guests. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was giving everything away just to be tolerated. I felt like I belonged because I had chosen to belong. On the fifth morning, as I sat with my cup of cinnamon tea watching the gulls swoop low over the water, my phone buzzed with a new email. Subject: just want to clear the air. From Mark. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity got the better of me. Hi, Mom. We're back now. Things obviously didn't go how we imagined. A lot went wrong, and I guess some of that was our fault. I'm not saying everything was handled perfectly. Maybe we all could have communicated better. Olivia didn't mean to exclude you the way it sounded. She just had a vision for the trip, and in hindsight, maybe it wasn't fair. Anyway, we're in a bit of a bind financially. We had to rebook flights and accommodations last minute, and things have gotten tight. I know the situation with the funds probably can't be reversed, but if you're able, could you consider helping us cover the deposit we lost? The kids were so confused when things fell apart, and I'd like to make it up to them somehow. We're family, and I hope we can talk when you get back. Mark. I read it once. Then again. Not a single genuine apology. No ownership. Just soft excuses wrapped in phrases like maybe and in hindsight. And then, buried halfway down the email like an afterthought, the real reason he'd written. Money. Even now, after everything, he wanted me to help clean up the mess. I set the phone down on the porch table and let the sound of the waves wash over me. A pelican dived into the water with a splash, reappearing with a fish wriggling in its beak. Life went on. With or without apologies. Millie came outside, still in her floral robe, holding a plate of toast. You're up early, she said, sitting next to me. Old habits, I answered with a small smile. She nodded toward the phone. Bad news. Just a familiar story, I said simply. She didn't press. She didn't offer advice. She just took a bite of toast and handed me a piece. And in that small, quiet moment, I realized how different this was from the life I'd left behind. No guilt trips. No emotional acrobatics. Just presence. Later that day, we drove down to Bahia Honda State Park, endless stretches of shallow, turquoise water shimmering under the sun. Doris stood ankle-deep in the surf, arms open wide like she was greeting the world for the first time. Rita found a shaded spot under a palm tree and started sketching in a notebook she hadn't touched in years. I wandered a little farther down the beach alone, the warm water curling around my ankles. I thought about Mark's email, the polite words, the convenient timing, the way he asked for money without ever really saying, "I'm sorry." I realized something then. For decades, I had confused keeping the peace with keeping quiet. I'd mistaken forgiveness for surrender. But silence can be sharper than any confrontation. That night, after dinner, I sat on the porch with my laptop. I opened Mark's email one last time. The blinking cursor sat in the reply box, waiting. I hovered over the keys, then closed the laptop. There was nothing to explain, nothing to justify. Because the truth was simple. If someone only reaches out when they need something, they were never really reaching for you. I blew out the candle sitting beside Henry's photo and whispered softly, "Not this time." The ocean breeze lifted the curtain slightly, like it agreed. I went to bed that night without guilt pressing against my chest for the first time in years. When the trip ended, none of us wanted to pack. On our last morning in the Keys, the air was still and golden, the tide low, the beach scattered with tiny shells that glimmered like secrets in the sand. Millie walked along the waterline humming an old hymn. Rita insisted on making pancakes for everyone even though we'd already cleaned the kitchen. Doris sat in a rocking chair on the porch, eyes closed, letting the breeze touch her face like a memory she never wanted to end. I stood by the railing with my cup of tea, watching the sunlight hit the waves. I thought about how this trip began with a late-night text that sliced me out of my own plans. And how it ended with me here, surrounded by women who didn't need me to shrink to make room for them. I wasn't leaving defeated. I was leaving different. We loaded the van slowly, like we were resisting gravity itself. The ride back up the overseas highway was quiet at first, everyone watching the blue water slide by on both sides. Halfway through, Rita leaned forward from the back seat. "You know, Joe," she said, "I can't remember the last time I felt like someone wanted me somewhere." Millie patted her hand. "Well, now you'll have to get used to it." We all laughed, but there was something deeper behind it, something that felt like healing. When I got home that evening, the house felt both familiar and foreign. The travel kits I'd made for the grandkids were still sitting in a box in the hallway. The coconut candles were half burned. The picture of Henry still smiled from the mantel. But something in me had shifted. The walls hadn't changed, I had. I unpacked slowly, folding clothes into drawers, tucking souvenirs into corners. I hung a photo we'd taken on the last night, the 6 of us lined up on the porch, the string lights glowing above, the ocean stretching endlessly behind us. In the center of the table in that picture was Henry's photo. He was smiling, like always. For once, I wasn't the one standing behind the camera. The next afternoon, Mark showed up at my door. He hadn't called ahead. I saw his car through the kitchen window, same dent on the back bumper, same faded "Family First" sticker peeling at the edges. I opened the door but didn't step aside to let him in. "Hey, Mom," he said. He looked tired. Maybe embarrassed. Or maybe just cornered. "Can we talk?" I nodded once and leaned against the doorframe. He shifted awkwardly. "Look, I know things got complicated." I raised an eyebrow. "Complicated?" He sighed. "Okay. Messy. I know the way we handled the trip wasn't right. I should've." "I don't know," said something. "Olivia." I cut him off gently. "This isn't about Olivia. It never was. It's about you." He swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did," I said evenly. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I did." For a second, I thought he might actually apologize. A real one. No excuses. Just the truth. But then he glanced at his shoes, shoved his hands in his pockets, and said, "I just don't want this to tear the family apart. The kids miss you. They keep asking when you're coming over." There it was. The same soft deflection. The plea to move on without acknowledging what was broken. I folded my arms. "Mark, this isn't tearing the family apart. This is me stepping out of the corner I let myself get pushed into." He frowned. "I don't understand what that means." "I know," I said quietly. "And that's exactly the problem." The silence between us stretched long and heavy. Finally, he asked the question I knew was coming. "Are you still angry?" I shook my head. "No, not angry. Just awake." He stared at me for a long moment, then exhaled. "I don't know how to fix this." I gave a small, tired smile. "Maybe it's not yours to fix." I didn't invite him in. I didn't make him lemonade like I usually did. I didn't soften the edges of the moment. I let it stand sharp, clear, honest. After he left, I sat on the porch alone. The Florida sun was beginning to set, turning the sky into a wash of orange and deep pink. I thought about all the times I'd filled the silence with explanations, all the ways I'd smoothed over cracks so no one else had to feel uncomfortable. Not anymore. My phone buzzed on the table. A new group message from Olivia. Glad you're back. We should all get together soon and put this behind us. Family's what matters most. I read it once, then deleted it. Family does matter, but not the way she meant it. I walked inside and lit the last lavender candle. The house filled with that familiar scent, Henry's favorite. I placed the new photo from the trip beside his picture on the mantel. This was my family now too. Chosen. Honest. Present. For decades, I'd believed that love meant staying silent. But silence, when it's a choice, can be the loudest answer of all. I stepped out onto the porch as the wind chimes sang softly in the breeze. The stars were beginning to appear one by one. I wasn't waiting for an apology anymore. I wasn't waiting for an invitation. I was exactly where I was supposed to be.